Hello there, and welcome to Bloom Talks on Facebook Live. I'm Charlie Bloom.
Linda Bloom here. We're back from the East Coast. We had a great time, and it's good to see you. Hope you missed us.
And if this is the first time that you're tuning in, welcome. And we hope that you will find this half hour that we're going to spend together useful and informative and instructive, and maybe even fun. It's okay to, enjoy the process sometimes. It doesn't have to always be a lot of serious, hard work to create great relationships. And if you're not having a little fun once in a while, even during the tough times, then check it out and see what you can do to lighten up a little bit.
We enjoy your questions and comments, so you can post them on the Facebook feed, and we'll address as many of them as we can.
So today's theme has to do with going from breakdown to breakthrough, rather than going from breakdown to break up. And we're going to be looking at what that process involves, and hopefully giving you some thoughts about what it is that you can do to transform what you might otherwise see as a problem into an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And the opportunity, when there's a breakdown in a relationship, is that there's a level of motivation to really take a closer, harder look at some of the things that may have needed some attention, that have been neglected. That's one of the main reasons that people get into trouble, is not so much that they argue too much, it's that they don't communicate enough, that they neglect to really address issues that need attention. And, like anything else that requires attention, when it's neglected, it doesn't just get better automatically. It doesn't even stay the same. It usually erodes and deteriorates, and that's certainly true for relationships. So we're going to be looking at how it is that we can transform potential problems or issues that we see as problematic into opportunities to deepen and strengthen your connection.
So one of the questions that we get asked quite often, and this is more frequently the case when people come to us for counseling, is, do you think that this relationship can be saved? Or is it really so pathological? Is it so sick? Is it so full of poison that we should just give up on it and cut our losses? And so, although I do not believe that all relationships deserve to be saved, some of them really, it's the best thing to do to let go. But often people give up too early. And just because a relationship might be broken down, there may be an accumulation of grievances. There may have been a lot of things that haven't been spoken, or have been spoken but haven't been addressed. It may look like it's just cold ash, but if there's a burning ember under there, it can be fanned into a flame of love and cooperation. Sometimes it just looks like it's over. But if people are coming for counseling, at least one of them, and usually both, have some hope. So it's our job to probe around in that ash, and for us to point out to them that there is some hope, there is some motivation, there is some intuitive sense that the relationship could be resuscitated and brought back to health. And I think that people can only win when they give it their very best effort. Because if you do your own work and you look at yourself and you resist the temptation to confess your partner's sins, and I know it's very tempting because it's so obvious what they're doing and not doing, and saying it's not saying, that's causing a relationship to be at low ebb. But if we can get our attention off of them and onto ourselves and what qualities we might need to grow in ourselves to make the relationship wonderful, the honesty to bring up the tough subjects, the courage to bring up the subjects, the resilience to bounce back from adversity. If we can keep our attention on ourselves and do our own work by developing the qualities and the skills, and if our partner is inspired to do that too, we've got a chance. We've got a good, strong chance of saving the relationship. And we hold out the possibility of not only restoring it to the prior level of trust, but exceeding the prior level of trust to make the relationship even stronger and more fulfilling than it was. So you make the descent into the dark, shadowy realms so that you can make the ascent into the higher realms of well-being that relationships can be. And sometimes people do their very best work and it isn't enough. And I always encourage people to make their best effort, but if it isn't enough, to let go with some loving kindness. And I'll talk about more about that in a little bit later on.
Yeah, it's really true that most people do wait too long to get help when they need it. And you may not know this, but statistically, the average couple who does eventually get counseling has been struggling without help with the problem unsuccessfully for a little over 6 years.
Isn't that a heartbreaking statistic? It's terrible.
So, I mean, we're not saying that at the earliest sign that there's some difficulty that you rush to the internet and find a therapist to help you. We really do encourage people to use whatever resources that they have personally, supports in terms of going to workshops, reading books, videos, friends. But when it becomes clear that your best efforts are not cutting it, and you're just kind of recycling the same arguments all the time about different subjects, but it's always about the same thing, which usually has to do with intimacy, openness, trust, vulnerability, power, money, the basics. When you find that you just can't seem to break out of those recycling patterns, then it's really a good idea to look for some good professional help. And if you get that at an early stage, then it's going to take a lot less time and money to get back on track again. The people who have waited 5, 6, 8 years usually have quite a bit of repair work that needs to be done in order to get back on track again. And so in their efforts to avoid, having to take that step, they end up having to spend more time in the therapist's office if they're lucky. And if they're not lucky, they might just decide that there's too much to do, it's too broken down, and just hang it up. So, again, we're not suggesting that, you make that phone call at the first indicator that there's some difficulty. Give it your best shot, but don't wait so long that you've lost the opportunity to handle things more efficiently and more quickly.
So Charlie's absolutely right that the timing is important, and the earlier you get help, if you've got an intractable problem, the better your prognosis is, the better chances of digging your way out of the place that you've gotten stuck. And another really essential, important ingredient is knowing the difference between what I can stand and what I can't stand. What is in the deal breaker category for me, and I just really can't live peacefully with this. And there are not a whole lot of those, It varies from couple to couple, but there's some common guidelines about deal breakers. Abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse can be a deal breaker. Addiction, drug addiction, food addiction, gambling addiction, alcohol addiction, and these are if they are not treated, if there isn't motivation to do something about it, that puts it in the deal breaker category. And of course, if you have a monogamous relationship and you have a vow of fidelity and that's broken, then that can be a cause for a deal breaker. If people don't want to get help and repair after that assault and trauma on the relationship. There are others too, like basic values difference about honesty and responsibility and so forth. But the things that people get divorced about often don't fall into these very prominent categories. They fall into a category of, I'm just feeling sort of bored. I'm just feeling like this relationship doesn't bring the best out of me. I'm not feeling like I'm growing here. I feel like I'm stagnating. And this is so treatable. This is so workable as long as there's motivation. And if there's motivation on both sides, tremendous growth can take place. So I'm inviting those of you who may be wondering, is my discontent in the deal breaker category or not? And if you find that you're up against that wall of it is the deal breaker category, it's really important to start by telling yourself the truth, and then you can speak openly to your partner. So I see Mike Gelman's tuned in, and I want to tell you hello. We're going to be at Esalen and Big Sur on Valentine's weekend again this year. We are going to have a big class, so if you or people that you know want to be in there, they need to sign up right away so they won't be closed out of housing. We'll have room in the workshop, but they may not be able to put you up because all the housing's taken.
Yes, so this whole question of how to avoid going down that slippery slope that it's so easy to slide down when there's been an accumulation of resentment and a failure to adequately attend to the needs of the relationship. The simple answer to that question is do your own work. DYOW. And that is, in case you haven't figured it out yet, much easier said than done. Because we have such a strong tendency, all of us, to be much more acutely aware of what our partner's work is, about what they need to do, what they're doing wrong, what they need to do more, what they need to stop doing, what they need to understand. And being so preoccupied with what's on their side of the net rather than looking at, well, what about me? What is it that I might have done that has contributed to us being in this place? And what is it that I might be able to do in order to help us break through this and into something that is going to be much more mutually fulfilling? So it's always a good idea to be mindful of the tendency that we have. And while you may be absolutely correct about what your partner is doing that has been contributing to the problem, focusing on that and trying to get them to be different rather than attending to what we need to do in order to do our part is not going to help. As a matter of fact, you may have noticed that when somebody tries to get you to behave in a certain way or to do something or to coerce or manipulate you into a certain behavior, it generally doesn't feel real good, and you don't feel inclined to want to cooperate with them a lot of the time. So it really is a much more productive strategy to be more willing to focus on what is it that I may have been doing that has contributed to what we're doing here, what's happening here now, and what is it that I can do that might have the possibility of bringing us to a better place.
So let me give you a few examples. One example that comes right to mind about taking a higher level of responsibility is don't just suck it up. Don't just, what I call, candy coat the cesspool. You know, don't put the chocolate coat over the cess. Be willing to tell yourself the truth. This is really painful for me. This is unsatisfying for me. This is frustrating for me. I have resentment here. I'm missing out on living joyfully. This is not working for me. And start with telling yourself the truth, and then be proactive and be willing respectfully to let your partner know how much you're suffering. And it's very important to put an agreement in place with our partner that we speak the honest truth without blame and judgment, the truth of our deeper experience. So I think I've told you before that I come from the long line of grudge holders, you know, a long line of sacrificing women who sucked it up, who stuffed it down, who were unhappy, but they didn't necessarily let on how unhappy and miserable they were. So it was damaging to our relationship many years ago. Fortunately, I've recovered. I've stopped that particular dysfunction in my lineage. Mostly. Yeah. But Charlie's helped me to feel safer, to come out and to value my complaints. And he holds them with honor and respect. And he would rather that I tell him the truth rather than I suck it up and it'll come leaking out in a different way. So I want to give another example, because sometimes people get this thing about don't stuff it and don't suck it up. The Buddhists have a beautiful phrase that they use. They call it misplaced tolerance. Isn't that beautiful? Tolerance is wonderful, but there can be a time when you have to stand up to the adversity and injustice and speak up. But it's important to do it in a respectful way. So some people, their misery, their unhappiness, their dissatisfaction, their resentment is coming out in explosive outbursts. You know, they stuff it, and then they explode. And that is just as destructive as stuffing it. That you want to find a way to communicate about your deeper experience, that you're hurting, that you're in pain, and that you're frightened, and speak from that vulnerability. And these are both powerful ways of being proactive about not just being in a holding pattern.
Yeah, vulnerability is really the key to breaking through the defensive reactive patterns that we get into as couples. And vulnerability isn't just about getting being more willing to talk about our pain and our fear and, you know, our loneliness. It really is about being willing to tell the truth about whatever it is that's there, including anger, including fear, disappointment, unfulfilled desire. And when we're doing that, it's important that we not express those disappointments and feelings in terms of the other person's failure. In other words, that we're not telling them this because we're holding them responsible for me feeling the way I feel, even though a lot of the time that is the way you're going to see it. You're going to see, if you were more this way, I wouldn't feel this way. So it's really your fault that I'm experiencing this. So whether it's true or not,
it's irrelevant, because we need to keep our attention on ourselves.
Yeah, making accusations to them is inevitably going to cause defensiveness on their part. And then whenever anybody gets accused of something, whether they feel that it's justified or not, there's an impulse to get defensive, to protect my self-image in a way, because basically what you're saying is, in some way I screwed up, I did something wrong. There's something wrong with me. And it's inevitable that we're going to feel some need to justify or explain or rationalize ourselves. The problem with that is that as soon as our focus goes from listening to the other person's feelings to needing to defend ourselves, we've interrupted the communication flow, and we can't really hear the other person. And we're going to get defensive, and then they're going to have trouble hearing us because they're busy defending us against our defensiveness. So there's it's very common that what one person sees as simply defending themselves, the other person feels as an attack.
So what Charlie's talking about here is replacing the pattern of attack, defend, attack, defend, attack, defend, or deny it with another pattern. And we talk about creating the context of goodwill. If we're committed to creating a context of goodwill, when we bring up our dissatisfaction, it will be done with kindness and respect. When we're deciding which therapist to choose to assist us, it will be done with kindness and respect. When we're engaged in doing our own work, we'll do it with kindness and respect. And even if we come to the point where we must let go of the relationship and free each other to go on to a different life apart, we do it with kindness and respect. And I promised you a little earlier that I would talk to you about taking your leave if it comes to that. Most people don't break up a relationship very well. They do it badly. They leave without any closure. They sometimes ghost. They sometimes leave a voicemail or an email or a text message. They don't have a face-to-face goodbye. Sometimes a longer-term relationship and people still duck out that way. That is not respectful, and that's not loving kindness. And what you want to do is admit the truth that you're not a good match, no fault, no blame, and that you honor the good things that you did learn from each other and the good times that you did have together. And you resist the temptation to try to make yourself feel better and justify the separation by taking the parting shots. So this climate of goodwill, this environment of goodwill, this context of goodwill will really stack the deck for success, even if it turns out to be a successful parting. I want to say one important thing about finding professional help. You know, just like plumbers, electricians, there's all level of help therapeutically. And in the marriage counseling community, there's some people who are very gifted and capable and people who aren't so much. It's a little controversial, but we both encourage people to ask personal questions. Are you partnered? Are you in a long-term committed partnership? Are you happy in your partnership? And if a marriage counselor refuses to answer that and say, I don't answer personal questions, you might know that they're not the right one for you. Because anybody who knows the territory and has personal experience with what it takes to co-create a great relationship wouldn't be so private that they wouldn't tell you the answer to that question is yes.
I wouldn't necessarily say that any person who is unwilling to get personal is not a potentially competent, qualified therapist. But I do think that you have a right to find out about this person's relationships. Not that they need to give you details about them, but just general questions that can give you some sense of whether they're familiar with the territory from their own personal experience. I want to say something else about what Linda was saying in terms of goodwill. It's a great theory. You're not going to always be able to do it. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, you're not going to be able to find it in your heart to be loving and kind to the person that you feel has totally ripped you off. And that is an aspect of many dissolutions of relationships, that there's a stage in which one or both people really feel victimized. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, at those times to be kind-hearted and compassionate with the other person, because you're too busy tending to your own wounds. So try to
take a break.
Be patient with the process. Try to be patient with yourself if you don't always live up to the standards of compassion and love and acceptance and forgiveness that you think you should, because you're not always going to be able to. And sometimes the person that we most need to forgive is ourselves for not being more forgiving.
That's right. One of the things that we often hear from people who come to work with us and do intensives or couples counseling, they say, I'm going to put all this work into this, and then maybe the relationship's not going to work out and we're going to have to separate. And I say, I can't guarantee that you're going to have the breakthrough that you're dreaming of. Of course, I'm a romantic and I want to see that your relationship survives and thrives, but I can't guarantee that. But what I can guarantee is if you're really committed to doing your own work, you are going to come out ahead, no matter what happens to your relationship. Maybe you will have to separate, but you're going to be developed yourself. You're going to have better relationship skills, communication skills, handling differences well, conflict management skills, repair skills. This will hold you in good stead in all of your relationships. And since we tend to take our issues with us to the new relationship, you will be better prepared to deal with the new relationship challenges as they occur. And if you both are really doing your own work, the chances are way increased that you are going to have that breakdown become a breakthrough rather than a breakup. So it's a little bit stepping out on faith. It's a bit stepping into mystery. You know, what else is new? Big surprise. We don't have any guarantees, but the chances are really good that we're going to end up better off. You know, the other statistic that breaks my heart, in addition to the one about how long people wait before they ask help, you know, it's such a hyper-independent society that people are ashamed to say, I need help, I'm lost and confused, and our relationship's not in good shape. I think it's just terrible. But the other one is that most people who divorce don't even go to not even one couples counseling session. That really upsets me and bothers me because it could have made all the difference. I feel like some of the people who are separating and divorcing, there really is still love there. There is an ember under the ash, and they could have made it if they had good help.
Well, that pretty much wraps up our time for today. It's been fun, and the half hour, as always, has flown by.
Yeah.
But we are going to be back again next Thursday, same time. The topic next Thursday is about overcoming FOMO. And for those of you who don't know what FOMO is, it stands for what does it stand for?
Fear of missing out.
Yeah. Gonna keep those options open.
Tell your friends who tend to be possessed by greed and fear of missing out that we've got something good in store for them next week.
Don't miss out on next week. You're gonna want to be there. So we'll see you then.